Since Trump's victory at last year's election, a consensus has emerged that the Democrats need to move back to the centre. There was a pretty widespread sense that the Democrats had moved, in some sense, too far left over the past couple of years, as evidenced by the fact that self-described moderates swung heavily to Trump, and Democratic operatives have spent the past few months trying to convince the party to give up on quote-unquote identity politics and refocus on the working class. However, not only has this proved surprisingly difficult, with Democrats struggling to agree on a party line for issues like tariffs, there's also more and more data suggesting that left-wing candidates can succeed electorally, not least Zohran Mamdani's recent victory in the New York City mayoral primary. So in this video, we're going to explain why more and more people think the Democrats should actually stick to their guns on the left, and whether it's actually a good idea. If you're a TLDR fan and want to support the channel, then consider picking up a copy of our magazine. Too Long helps to fund all of our journalism and allows us to make free videos for YouTube like this one. You can learn more and buy a copy by clicking the link in the description. So there are several reasons why moving to the left could be a winning strategy for the Democrats, with the most recent and perhaps glaring example being the New York City mayoral election. New Yorkers voted in the Democratic primary for mayor on Tuesday, and delivered a stunning victory to 33-year-old Democratic Socialist candidate Zohran Mamdani, who defeated party heavyweight and former governor Andrew Cuomo, who had huge name recognition, financial resources, and endorsements. The primary election is sort of a microcosm of the wider battle for the Democratic Party, as it pitched a fresh-faced progressive against the party's old guard establishment. Mamdani's campaign, which took him from polling as low as 1% to securing the Democratic nomination, focused on lowering the cost of living for New Yorkers with policies like free buses, rent freezes for stabilised apartments, universal childcare, and higher taxes on the wealthy, but whilst also maintaining progressive positions on cultural issues. He coupled this with unapologetic attacks on Cuomo, who was seeking a political comeback 4 years after resigning the governorship amid sexual harassment allegations. But Mamdani's campaign and its creative messaging was also incredibly optimistic, which helped him generate genuine excitement and an organic groundswell of support from a racially and economically diverse coalition that beat out Cuomo's political machine. As one former Obama aide put it, what happened in New York City is a blaringly loud message to those in the Democratic establishment who still cling to old politics, recite focus group talking points, and are too afraid to say what needs to be said. Whether the party learns from this experience or doubles down and closes ranks remains to be seen, but don't be surprised if we see more and more insurgent campaigns like Mamdani's challenging big names in the coming election cycles. And if we look at the national level too, other left-wing Democrats are also enjoying their moment in the sun, perhaps most notably Senator Bernie Sanders, who is independent but caucuses with the Democrats, and Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Since Donald Trump returned to office, Sanders and AOC have been crisscrossing the country, drawing crowds of thousands on their Fighting Oligarchy tour, which has enabled them to push their progressive message, particularly their opposition to billionaires and corporate influence in US politics. And despite them both being solidly on the left of the Democratic Party platform, they both enjoy considerable popularity. In fact, recent polling suggests that Sanders is the most popular political figure in the country, while the net favourability of, for example, Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, and indeed the Democratic Party as a whole, is deeply in the red. While some Democratic strategists argue that the party's best move is to sit back and let Trump unravel himself, others say the key to rebuilding public support for the party is to take a leaf out of Sanders' book and embrace economic populism. And this looks like a sensible position to take when you consider that polling shows that raising taxes on large corporations and wealthy households is a really quite popular position. Nonetheless, there are several reasons to caution against a dramatic pivot to the left. For starters, Democrats should be wary of inferring too much from Mamdani's success, especially at the national level. New York is obviously more left-wing than most of America, and Mamdani was up against some arguably pretty soft competition in the scandal-ridden Andrew Cuomo. It's also worth noting that only about 1 million people voted in the recent Democratic primary, and even if Mamdani wins the actual election, which is due in early November, he probably won't need that many votes, in large part due to the fact that New York's local elections happen on odd years, i.e. between the midterms and general elections. Turnout is reliably pretty rubbish and came in at just 23% in 2021. Second, while it's true that Sanders and AOC are remarkably popular, when you dig into the polling, you quickly realise it's not because of their left-wing policies. In fact, that Data for Progress poll we mentioned earlier in the video actually asked respondents why they perceived Sanders favourably or unfavourably. Interestingly, very few people who perceived Sanders favourably cited his left-wing policies. Instead, the three most oft-recited reasons were he seems more authentic, he's more willing to challenge the political establishment, and he's consistent in his views. Conversely, the most oft-cited reason among those who perceived him unfavourably were indeed his left-wing policies, which was the main reason for nearly a third of voters who don't like Sanders. This implies that Sanders' appeal is more about his apparent authenticity and anti-establishment politics, rather than his left-wing ideas. This could also be true for Mamdani. Sure, he's left-wing on certain issues, but perhaps his real appeal stems from the fact that he pitched himself as very much a political outsider, fighting against an archetypal establishment figure in Andrew Cuomo. Similarly, other polling suggests that left-wing positions, especially on cultural issues and immigration, just aren't that popular in America. In 2024, for instance, Democrats were way to the left of the median voter when it came to immigration and affirmative action, which definitely hurt them at the ballot box. However, it's worth mentioning that left-wing positions on social issues might become less unpopular if Trump overreaches, and even if left-wing policies remain unpopular, left-wing economic policies generally poll pretty well. Sanders' hallmark economic policies, for instance, include higher taxes on the rich, a higher minimum wage, and the expansion of Medicare, are all pretty popular. Bloomberg polling from last year, for instance, shows that 69% of Americans support higher taxes on anyone making more than $400,000. 51% support raising the corporation tax rate. And Data for Progress polling found that 64% support a $17 minimum wage, up from $7.25 at the moment. This obviously suggests that left-wing Democrats should focus more on economic issues rather than cultural issues. But perhaps the big takeaway from Sanders and Mamdani's success is that Democrats should present themselves as anti-establishment, which is something Trump has done very successfully in the past, and authentic. This speaks to both the limits of poll-driven politics and a big risk for Democrats trying to move to the centre. If this centrist pivot is perceived by the electorate as inauthentic, it'll probably backfire. Now, when talking about topics like these, it's important to be precise, and precision is also crucial to our sponsor this week, Henson Shaving. Henson's AL13 razor, which they produce at their aerospace machine shop, perfectly holds the blades at a 30-degree angle and extends it only 0.0013 inches, less than the width of a human hair, which means incredibly high tolerances, very high standards, and superb precision, offering a much healthier shave compared to the overpriced plastic razor cartridges. And speaking of plastic, Henson razors are completely plastic-free, from the blade to the box. Everything Henson send to you is entirely recyclable, meaning that while you protect your skin from an expensive razor burn, you're also protecting the environment from adding to the 2 billion razor cartridges that are thrown away every year in the US alone. Finally, buying Henson razors is simply cheaper. No longer will you be forced into buying those expensive and unsupportive replacement blades, as Henson blades cost about 10 cents each. This allows you to replace your blades more frequently, so you don't need to keep dragging a dull razor across your face to try and get value out of that overpriced plastic. If you want to try it out, go to hensonshaving.com/TLDR or click the link in the description, then add a razor and 100 blades to your cart. Once you've done that, add our discount code TLDR at checkout and you'll get all of those blades totally free. And you'll be on your way to a healthier shave.